Hello, hello. Welcome to day 29 of the Business English Idioms Challenge. The last few days have not been exactly in chronological order, but that's okay. We're going for done is better than perfect, and I'm excited to jump into this second last day. And then, of course, day 30 will be the last one, and then I will put all my time and attention into wrapping up the creation of the course and offering this live if there's enough interest in doing so, where we could go through and talk about these together. Today, we are looking at something that's a little bit negative, negative workplace roles. And as always, I would really consider or invite you to consider that it's really important to learn the idioms and to really pay attention to how they are used around you. If you're in an English-speaking environment, pay attention to how people use them in the workplace. Pay attention to which ones you hear often and slowly start to integrate those into your active vocabulary that you actually use. Be really careful with these negative ones because they are offensive, or some of them are neutral, some of them are a little bit towards the offensive end, but they could be offensive if used in the wrong way. So you want to be really careful about how you use them. I think it's important to know them, to understand the nuances of when it's positive, when it's negative, when it's neutral, and to understand what people are saying. So that's what we're focused on, is learning these idioms that are expressions that have a meaning that you have to learn. And we're really focused on understanding that this is about spoken communication in a professional setting, and it's not about written communication. So we'd never use these for written communication in business. These are very informal and informal, negative, and could definitely be taken the wrong way. So please be very careful. Do not integrate these into your active vocabulary immediately, and be careful how you use them, and be kind. I think it's okay to talk about describing yourself in these ways and saying, I used to have a problem with this, but now I've overcome it. I think you get into difficulty when you describe other people in these ways. And do not use these to describe yourself in a job interview. That would be a terrible thing. So be very careful with these ones, okay? And important to know, but don't start using them right away. Okay, so, I didn't read the list. We are talking about a micromanager, a paper pusher, a clock watcher, a know-it-all, and a lone wolf. That last one could also be positive in some contexts, and we'll talk about that. We're going to look at them in context, and I will give you, sorry, I'm just going to adjust my seat a little bit so I'm closer to my microphone. I will give you all of the idioms all at once. As always, please remember that this is not how we would use them. Native speakers would use one or two idioms every now and then, not all at once. This is just so that you can get a feel for them. We'll read it at the beginning and the end, and in between, we'll talk about the idioms. Okay, here we go. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown in my career. I used to be a micromanager, constantly overseeing every detail. But I've learned to trust my team and delegate effectively. To delegate means to instruct other people appropriately to take on some of your tasks, to tell people what to do so you don't end up doing everything. Okay. I think the micromanaging stemmed, there's a good word, something stemmed from something. It means it came from. So the micromanaging came from, or stemmed from, it stemmed from how little control I had over my own tasks. I sometimes felt I was just a paper pusher, as I had so many meaningless bureaucratic tasks that didn't fit with my skills. Okay, bureaucratic means related to administration, filling out forms, and it has a connotation of excessively focused on details that don't actually matter. Bureaucratic bureaucracy, bureaucratic. I find that word the hardest word to spell in the English language. I always have to stop and think about it. I don't know. Is there a word that you really loathe, you detest, you hate having to spell? Tell me in the comments. I would love to know. Okay, second paragraph. The benefit of that experience is that I notice when people feel frustrated and when they are in danger of becoming clock watchers. I try not to share my insight from a know-it-all mindset, though. I used to be a bit of a lone wolf, but now I see better the value of listening and embracing different perspectives. Okay, so this is someone describing their current awareness of their growth in their career, and they are reflecting on the negative traits they used to have and how they have overcome them, and how in some instances those negative traits have made them more empathetic and understanding towards other people. So that's quite a nice reflection on their career. But again, please do not use these in a job interview to describe yourself. They're very negative and they are very informal, and it just won't do you any favors. So they're good to know. Don't use them in a formal situation. These would be for if you were talking with a coworker that you very much trust and you had a little bit more of an informal banter kind of conversation going on. It would be okay to reflect back on things and say, oh, I learned this. I used to be like that. That would be okay with a coworker that you trust very much, not in a formal situation though. Okay, let's talk about this one. It's very, very common. Oh, we have a comment. Someone watching live. Thank you for being here live. Good morning to you. Thank you, those of you on the replay as well. It's always such a pleasure when people tune in consistently, and I really appreciate you being here. Okay, micromanager, super common. Let's look at the examples. We usually get on well with him, but he's such a micromanager when stressed. It's terrible. Employees often feel stifled and not trusted when working under a micromanager. Okay, to be stifled means to be squashed and to feel like you're trapped and like can't breathe because you're so squashed. So if you're stifled, you feel like you don't have the space that you need to do the things that you need to do in the way that you would prefer to do them that would get good results. And if you're working under someone, it means this person is your boss. So it's problematic to have someone who's a micromanager. Now, if you think about the word micro, meaning like small, you can probably figure out what this means. It means a manager who really focuses on the small things. So too closely observes and controls the work of subordinates. So someone who is constantly criticizing. It's not just about looking at and seeing if everyone's okay, but it's about criticizing the small things. Like, okay, you did that presentation and we won a new client, but did you notice that there was a spelling error on page 2? Kind of really focused on small things and being very critical about them. So another very informal phrase we could use is to describe someone as a control freak, and that would be useful for a non-professional situation as well. You say, oh goodness, when we go camping, my husband is a bit of a control freak about organizing the car. But thank goodness he is, because if it was left to me, then it wouldn't be a good situation. Control freak, very rude, very negative. So again, describing someone that you're close to and being a little bit critical in that way would be okay informally. Be very careful in a professional situation. It wouldn't be okay to say that someone is a micromanager or a control freak. It's very critical. We can talk about somebody breathing down someone's neck. Now that means that they are actively being micromanaged and it feels as if someone's right there behind you, like watching everything. Or we can talk about someone being too much of a hands-on manager. That's a much more polite way of saying it. But again, it's still very critical. But if you said, oh my goodness, they need to see everything before it moves to the next step, and they're very critical, they are a little bit too much hands-on in their management. That's a better way of expressing it. Okay, do you think micromanaging can ever be beneficial in certain situations? Micromanaging always has a negative connotation I think there are situations where it's good to control things, but for me, I think micromanaging has a negative connotation. The only situation I can think is when you are first training someone and you are first teaching them to do something in a role, it's useful to control certain aspects of what they're doing. But I think micromanaging has that negative connotation always. But what do you think? Okay, a paper pusher. This is one where you can probably think about it and figure out the meaning, especially from the examples. He felt like nothing more than a paper pusher, handling endless forms and reports. Many talented individuals are stuck in paper pusher roles without any real impact. There was a English testing institution, I will not name them, that I worked for where I did some marking, and oh my goodness, it was so detailed and difficult, but ultimately it felt a bit meaningless. And so the marking that I did felt like paper pushing. Didn't enjoy it. I'm very much someone who likes to work with people, and I found it difficult to just work with the forms and just the corrections. So that felt like a paper pushing job to me. I know other people loved it. I still did it to the best of my abilities, but it didn't feel fulfilling. If you are a paper pusher or you're doing a paper pushing job, it means someone who does a lot of bureaucratic or administrative work, often implying it's unimportant. So that marking job felt like I was a paper pusher, because I felt like an AI system could have marked it equally well. And I feel like my skill is working with people, being empathetic, helping people. And so it wasn't using my skill sets, and it was very frustrating. So someone might feel like a paper pusher when they're doing too much paperwork and they're not making the impact that they would hope to. And they feel like the paperwork is unnecessary. So a more formal way of saying this would be someone is a bureaucrat. A desk jockey is very informal, rude, critical. So be careful with that one. An admin worker is neutral. That one could be respectfully applied to someone who works in administration, and that's not a criticism. But if you're not expecting to work in admin and you end up in admin, then you're saying, oh, I feel like an admin worker. It's not appropriate. I should be teaching people and connecting with people. So it could be used in a critical way, but it's not critical itself. Bureaucrat, kind of neutral. Desk jockey, very negative. Paper pusher, very negative. Ever felt like a paper pusher in your job? How did you handle it? Okay, that's a very personal question to ask, but I would still invite you to try and use that idiom, paper pusher, in a sentence and put it in the comments to join in that way, or to answer that prompt out loud by speaking it out loud. But I understand that's a very personal one to respond to. Okay, a clock watcher is another one that you can probably figure out the meaning of it instantly. Being a clock watcher can negatively impact team morale and productivity. Team morale means how positive, together, and uplifted the team is. So that's a good word. The morale means the good feeling, positiveness, or the feeling within a corporation or a team. So you could actually have, so it actually means the feeling within a team. So you could have positive morale or low morale, and morale is just the feeling that is there. So being a clock watcher can make the morale, the feeling, drop. Okay, second one. The day passes really slowly if you fall into the negative habit of clock watching. Okay, that's a nice phrase, to fall into. So that means you, over time, develop a bad habit. Fall into. So I fell into being someone who arrives late, or I fell into getting up late, or I fell into what other bad habits? Smoking. Not that I'm a smoker. You fall into a bad habit. So over time, little by little, you pick up a habit until it's become really solid and formed. Okay, so the day passes really slowly if you fall into the negative habit of clock watching. So if you are a clock watcher, that means an employee who's more concerned with leaving work on time than with the quality of their work. So it implies someone who's really dissatisfied with the work that they're doing and is disengaged. So again, a very negative one. So don't describe someone else as a clock watcher. That would be very rude. Slacker, also incredibly rude. So that means someone who does no work, does not work well. You could describe yourself in an informal way and say, oh gosh, I just didn't get much done this afternoon. I feel like a slacker, even though I've done a lot. So slacker, someone who's not working at all or not interested in working. But don't describe anyone else in that way. That's quite negative, very negative, and very, very informal. So it's not for a formal business context at all. 9-to-5er, again, very critical. It's saying that someone is only interested in working the contracted hours that they are contracted for. So the criticism is that they're not going to go above and beyond. I personally take umbrage with that one. To take umbrage to I criticize. I don't like that one, because I do feel like you should work your contracted hours. I really believe in the idea of work hard and play hard. And I really encourage other people to work really hard within their contracted hours and then not work. They're not contracted to work. So yeah, I take offense at that one. What about you? Do you feel like you should do much more than your contracted hours always? I feel like I want to develop systems where I can get everything done efficiently within the time that it's supposed to. A lot of our corporate environments reward not being a 9-to-5 or working more than our contracted hours. Tell me in the comments, what do you think? And then a quiet quitter with 2 T's, not 3. Goodness, it's a typing error. Sorry, apologies. A quiet quitter, someone with strong boundaries around not doing extra work. So that is someone who is refusing to take on extra things, and they are doing the minimum. So this is a negative or positive depending on how you're looking at it. So you could say it's a positive in that person has strong boundaries. They're still getting the work done, but they are refusing to do extra. Or you could say negative in that they're doing the minimum. Okay. Do you think being a clock watcher is always a negative trait? For me personally, I think it depends on the reason that you have become a clock watcher. Occasionally, you could say that it might be slightly positive in that someone is really managing their time well and is making sure that they are done by the end of the day and that they're not going to do extra. But mostly, the meaning of clock watcher is very negative in that someone is just waiting for the day to end and they're just doing the absolute minimum, waiting until they can check out. So we would usually use this in a negative way. Okay, a know-it-all. Her know-it-all attitude made it difficult for others to work with her when they needed to question things. Having a know-it-all in team meetings can be difficult as it stifles collaboration. Okay, a know-it-all. You can probably think about what that means. Comes across quite clearly. I've got a comment that says, in our culture. Is that relating to the last one? I'm not sure what that is in connection with. If you give a little bit more detail, then I can engage with that comment, but thank you for the comment. Okay, a know-it-all is someone who behaves as if they know everything. You can also talk about someone being a smart aleck, a wise guy, or a show-off, but those are slightly different. Smart aleck means someone who's like got smart comments and is quite sarcastic and critical. And a wise guy, the same thing, like someone who says kind of mean, sharp, critical things quickly. And then someone who's showing off is like someone who wants to be presented as the best all the time. Okay, so yes, so in our culture, more work, more risk. Is that? I think that relates to the other one of being a clock watcher, that people in your culture are in that way. I'm not sure. But thank you again for the comment. Yes, so a know-it-all, someone who is unwilling to accept other people's knowledge and advice. So I think this can be problematic because you cannot know it all. Everyone is constantly learning, and it's being humble is really important. Even as professionals, we make mistakes. We need to learn new things, take on new knowledge, um, and I think it's important to recognize that you cannot know everything, and you should surround yourself with people that are going to offer new knowledge to you. Do you think know-it-alls are often misunderstood? What do you think? People who always feel like they've got the right answer, or they always question things, do you think they are often misunderstood? I would love to know what you think about that. And you were saying make mistakes and you will get punished. Yes, some cultures are very punitive, and there are harsh consequences for making mistakes. Absolutely. Thank you for that comment. And maybe that leads to people being know-it-alls, that they feel that they cannot admit that they have knowledge gaps, which I think is really problematic. Just very quickly, I feel sometimes people who are know-it-alls are misunderstood, and I'm really grateful that as a world, we are gaining more knowledge of things like neurodiversity, the fact that people's brains work in different ways. So someone constantly questioning, why are we doing this? I think we should do it that way, might not necessarily be arrogance and being a know-it-all. Might be that that's just the way they process information, and their tone of voice is being misunderstood. Thinking particularly about people with autistic traits or ADHD, the communication gap can sometimes be quite large, and I feel like people are sometimes misunderstood where they are questioning or stating their knowledge for good reasons, and they come across as a know-it-all. So there are some times when people are misunderstood. I think lone wolves are often misunderstood. I am definitely a bit of a lone wolf, even though I love working with people. This one can be positive and negative. We'll talk about it. So he was known as a lone wolf, often completing projects without any help. Being a lone wolf can sometimes lead to innovative ideas, but also to isolation. So a lone wolf is someone who prefers to work or act alone rather than with others. So we can talk about someone being a solitary worker or an independent worker, and that's just very neutral. We talk about them being a loner. Now, we wouldn't use that in a business context. We'd use that in a personal context and say, oh, that person didn't want to go to the party. They're a bit of a lone wolf. And it's critical, negative, and it's saying they're not joining in well with others. On the flip side, we can talk about someone not joining with others being a positive thing because they're so independent and they've got different ideas going on. And then the word can be positive, to say that that person is a maverick, a lone wolf, because they always go off and create their own ideas. Mostly it's used in a negative way to say that that person is not integrated well into the team. But it could be used in a positive way to say, oh, they went and worked on that on their own. They came up with a solution and then they came back to the team. They didn't need anyone's help. That's amazing. They're a real lone wolf. So, what are the pros and cons of having a lone wolf in a team? What are the positive things and what are the negative things? To have someone that would prefer to work on their own, prefer to do things independently. There's both positive and negative. Okay, we're going to look at the extract again, and then we're going to do a really short quiz. Looking back, I can see how much I've grown in my career. I used to be a micromanager, constantly overseeing every detail. But learned to trust my team and delegate effectively. I think the micromanaging stemmed from how little control I had over my own tasks. I sometimes felt like I was a paper pusher, as I had so many meaningless bureaucratic tasks that didn't fit with my skills. The benefit of that experience is that I notice when people feel frustrated and when they are in danger of becoming clock watchers, people that are just waiting to leave. I try not to share my insight from a know-it-all mindset, though. So I try not to come across as arrogant, like I've got all the answers because of this experience that I've had. I used to be a bit of a lone wolf, so I used to want to work on my own and I didn't want to work in a team. But now I see better the value of listening and embracing different perspectives. Okay, so hopefully those made a little bit more sense now that we've looked at them all individually. They're very commonly used idioms, but they are very negative and informal. So pay attention to when you hear them. Be very careful when you use them because they could be very offensive. Okay, let's think about the right synonym that would go with the idiom with a quick quiz. So a micromanager, would that be a hands-off leader, a control freak, or a lazy worker? And then a paper pusher, would that be a bureaucrat, innovator, or entrepreneur? What do you think for those? Take a moment and think which one would fit best for the idiom. A micromanager is a control freak or a hands-on leader, and then a paper pusher is a bureaucrat, someone who has to do a lot of um, unnecessary administrative work. Okay, thank you for joining me for this. Day 29, there's one more session left, and then we will have wrapped up all of these many business-related idioms. Thank you so much. Hope to see you on the last one. Bye for now.